Hello, I'm Anita White with the St. Croix River Holistic Practitioners. Today we're talking with Joni Polehna of Mind, Body, Spirit Integration. You are the founder and owner and the holistic practitioner.
That's
Hello,
right.
Joni, welcome.
Hi, Anita, thanks.
Tell me a little history about how you became a holistic practitioner.
Okay. Well, I actually have 30 plus years as a recreation therapist, and I actually worked in mental health. So I worked with people who had major mental illness most of the time, both inpatient and outpatient and in the community. And I helped them figure out what they needed to do to reduce their stress so that their symptoms of their mental illness would also reduce. Because if their illness symptoms reduced, they could function better in the community, in society, and just feel better in general. So for 30 years, I worked with people and realized we're all pretty much the same underneath everything. We all have the human tendencies, and on top of that, we have mental illness or physical illness or some condition, or maybe just quirks that make us who we are. Sometimes those pieces work for us, and sometimes they don't. So I was going to a lot of brain conferences, and part of it was to just figure out what can I do most to help people who have schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression to live in the community successfully. What are my best techniques? What are they studying? What is the research showing? So I would go to brain conferences somewhat frequently because I wanted the latest and newest that I could try with my clients. And one summer, 2 times I went to brain conferences where national speakers each said, there's evidence that shows that brain gym can help people with Alzheimer's disease. Well, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I was desperately looking for things that could help him. Now, he hadn't regressed to the point where he couldn't function at all, but the first thing for my dad to go was his speech. So he would sort of point at things or say, you know, and kind of come up with that kind of information so that we would guess a little bit about what he was trying to say. But when I heard this, I thought, what in the world? Never heard of brain gym before. Mm-hmm. So I went online and I typed it in, and I was looking all over the place for what I could find out, what I could learn about it. And before I was actually able to tap into the classes that were going to be offered that fall, my father actually had a massive stroke and died. And I know that sounds pretty dramatic and awful, but he hadn't fully lost his capabilities. In fact, he had been a driver ed instructor in a small town for 30 years, and so he was still driving a car because he still knew his directions, he still knew how to get along. He just couldn't quite get the words out as far as what they needed to be, but he was able to obey the laws and drive carefully and all those kind of things. So when he died, we were actually quite grateful that God didn't have him slide all the way into nothingness for us prior to his death. So my dad had led me to look into the brain gym techniques and the system, even though I wasn't able to use it to help him, because I wasn't even able to take any classes other than I got my hands on every book I could get a hold of to read about what was going on, how this worked. And I used those kinds of pieces with him. Didn't even know if I'd done any of them right. I was just going by what the book had to say. So after he died, I started taking classes, because my dad and I were kind of like this. And I knew that he had led me to this work. I couldn't help him with it, but I knew that I was supposed to find out more information about it and move forward from there. And so I did. So I looked into all kinds of things on brain gym. And what I realized was it was a way of repatterning things in our system so that we could have our life be what we want it to be.
Wonderful. So today we're going to talk a lot about brain gym.
Yes.
And we're going to explore a little bit more, Joni, about how you became a holistic practitioner. What does that mean? Are you licensed? Are you certified? What did it take for you to get to the point where you could be a practitioner of the brain gym?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I started to take the classes to understand the basics about how we work with our brain and how we can literally repattern the things that are going on in our brain. So at the very beginning, I was taking courses, and they are called things like Brain Gym 101, and moving on from there. And I think at this point, you need to take somewhere between 250 and 300 hours of study in order to become a licensed Brain Gym consultant and educator, and that is what I am at this point. So I am licensed by the Brain Gym people who, the Brain Gym piece is under the umbrella of Educational Kinesiology Foundation, or we call it the EDUK Foundation. And it licenses everyone who's taking the courses, and there are certain repeats you need to do to get it from a couple different people, and just to really understand the information before you take the final class where you become licensed. So I have that licensure, and along the way there were a number of different avenues that I'd hear about a class or see something coming up and I'd think, oh my gosh, is that ever interesting? So I'd take a class off in this avenue and that avenue. So I used probably 6, 7, 8 different techniques in my practice. And ultimately, that information comes from my clients. It is movement-based because we know that movement repatterns the brain. But I actually use applied kinesiology, which is the application of kinesiology, the study of muscles and movement. And we apply that to the body so that we can understand best how someone needs to learn a new pattern, bring a new pattern into their system, whatever it might be. So applied kinesiology works with muscle testing. When the mind, the body, and the spirit agree on an answer, we use actual muscle testing. We ask a question or make a statement to the system, and if they agree, we will get a strong muscle test. If one of the 3 of those has some information that says, wait a minute, that's not right, I don't agree with that, we cannot send our unified energy to whatever muscle we're testing to get a strong muscle test. So we ask the system questions, and we will get a strong muscle test. And I generally use the bicep muscle because it's a nice and strong one. Maybe have an elbow on the table. And I'm asking questions or making statements. And the muscle will be strong if the answer is yes, and it will not be able to be held if the answer is no. And I ask the person's system. I don't profess to know what you need given a certain situation. I ask your system, here's what we've identified as the place we want to go. How do we get there? What does your system tell me through applied kinesiology, yes or no? And people will say, you're pulling harder, you're not pulling hard enough, and all of those kind of things. And I'll say, I'll use my pinky. Does that prove to you I'm not pulling any harder and you're getting a yes or a no? And they usually will settle down and say, okay, I get it.
Okay.
So that's one piece of Brain Gym. We use basic movements. There is an introduction to Brain Gym that I'll actually be showing on a video a little bit later in the program, where I talk a little bit about how we shut down under stress. And it's the introductory information because stress shuts each one of us down. And frankly, it comes from caveman. We think we've come a long way since caveman, but not the case. Caveman had a reaction to stress whereby he shut down to using only one side of his brain so he could make snap decisions for survival. If he didn't survive, and basically we're on this planet to survive. If he didn't survive, he didn't populate the earth. So it was really imminent for him to have that shutdown of the system to only using one side of the brain. Well, I help people understand how they personally shut down under stress. And we actually know by testing, a lot of the Brain Gym work is really backed in science. And we actually can go back and find out that at 9 weeks in utero, that means at 9 weeks in the mother's womb, these patterns for how we respond to stress are already developed. So we're going back and we're finding out, what was your initial response to stress, even when you were in the womb? And then we sometimes learn to cope with other things that we do in life, but we're still in a shutdown state if we have any bit of stress response whatsoever. I like to work with people to understand that stress response so they can start to see what symptoms they have when they're in a stress state. And then Brain Gym has some very simple movements, 4 steps. One of them is called PACE. It stands for being positive, active, clear, and energetic. Well, if you think about it, when you feel those 4 things, you're in a good place. You feel good. Chances are you're operating from your heart, and it feels good. That's our natural state. Now, for the most part, caveman operated there most of the time. But the shutdown came when he saw danger or any kind of a threat, and he needed to get out of there. Run, fight, climb a tree, whatever it was to get himself safe. Well, he did that. He used up all the stress hormones that are produced when we start to feel that stress or that threat. And once we use those hormones by running or fighting or freezing, the hormones start to pull back. They start to be absorbed and used by the system so that the system can then calm down again and feel relaxed. Well, we think we've come a long way from all of that because what happens in our society now is we don't want to let anybody know that we're under stress or threat. So we suck it up, don't we? We kind of, and nobody knows, or we hope they don't see us sucking it up, and we never use that stress response. We never use all those chemicals, but all this energy is created in our system to fight, run, or freeze, and we haven't used any of it. But we want to get back to a relaxed state now. Sometimes it doesn't work. And we stay in a stress response much longer than we ever anticipate. And as a result, we don't think very clearly, we don't see very clearly sometimes. Sometimes we can't hear anything, and we can't take action. We procrastinate. Those are all stress responses, and depending on how you individually are organized, you will feel different parts of that. So I like to walk through that with people, and that's a part of Brain Gym, but I like people to understand, hey, when this is happening to you, you're in a stress response. And you won't be able to use your whole brain, both sides of the brain. You'll be in one side or the other, whichever side is your lead. Are you a left brain lead, which happens to be the details, linear language, logic thinking? Or you happen to be a right brain lead, which has to do with the big picture, concepts, ideas, and lots of emotion. It's important for us to identify where people stand in a stress response because then we can start to deal with it. We can get into pace, we can calm ourselves back down, and we feel positive, active, clear, and energetic once more, and we can proceed on using both sides of our brain. Very important work. So that's one piece of Brain Gym. And then there are 26 movements, as well as some very in-depth movements that work as well. The movements of Brain Gym address the parts of the brain, the side-to-side parts of the brain, the back-to-front parts, the top-to-bottom parts. So they are the 3 dimensions of the brain. And they're the 3 dimensions of intelligence as well. Well, we don't want to be shutting off any of those things. We want them all open and functioning for us. So the movements in Brain Gym, and there are 26 of them, address those dimensions. And often we can do a little tune-up for ourselves. If we just tune into which pieces we think we might need, and we do those movements, and we feel relaxed again, and everything's coming together. So one piece I do is to teach people how to use those movements, how to identify when they're in a stress response and they even need the movements. Another piece then is to work individually with people, or sometimes in a group or a family. Kind of depends. Sometimes a whole family might be affected by one person's poor patterning, I will call it, or at least a pattern that's not helping them. So the whole family will sometimes come in and we'll do a little work with everybody at the same time. So they're all getting a little piece of the repatterning. Now, you don't forget that you used to do something the other way, or you don't not remember past experiences that were traumatic or that happened. But we do release the emotional component of it, because it's the emotion that causes us to do one of those. And when we do that, we freeze, or we want to run or fight. It helps to release that emotion so that both sides of the brain come back, they're online, they're functioning again, and we can start to see the details and the big picture and how they fit together. We make much better responses, decisions. Life goes so much more easily. And that's what we want. This is our natural state. It's where we want to be all the time. If we have a stress response, we want it to be a blip. We do something about it, we calm back down. And what's interesting about that is some people are in a stress state or a stress response at end. I mean, they never get out of a stress response. And other people are in a natural state of calm most of the time. And it's only briefly that they get into stress and they calm back down. So we want to teach people how to recognize that stress response and then what to do about it. If pace doesn't help them get a new pattern, then we want to address those pieces individually, and we want to find out from your system using applied kinesiology or just noticing. Sometimes the body will say, gosh, you know what, I'm looking at this list of movements and that one's jumping off the page at me. We can notice. How many times have we shut down our noticing? We don't pay attention. Somewhere along the line, somebody might have said, oh, that feeling you have, forget about it. Doesn't mean anything. And as a result, our system kind of stops and says, oh, I can't trust my gut anymore. And we start to negate what we're feeling, our own internal noticing about what's going on. We start to negate that because some authority figure somewhere along the line said, that's not right, that's wrong. And we start to question ourselves and we think, maybe I don't know what I'm feeling anymore. It's time to open those pieces back up for ourselves, to notice, to pay attention, and to take action on what it is we need to do. So with the brain gym work, I will ask if a person coming to see me literally wants brain gym or not. They might want one of the other techniques that I use. But it seems to be especially helpful with women and children. Now the children piece is pretty understandable because it was created by Paul Dennison in California because he was trying to help children like himself who were considered learning disabled in the school system. Well, interestingly, the American school system was created by men. Most, but not all, there are always exceptions to the rule, most men are left brain. So the American school system teaches from a left brain details to the big picture standpoint. But children, and Paul was one of them, who use their right brain, need to see where they're going first. Where is the end point? And once we have the framework or the outline to the puzzle, they can settle down, get both sides of the brain opening up again. They can come back to the details, and they can put the details into the framework. Kids who start out with a left brain don't need the framework. They just take each piece along as it comes, and by the time they get to the end, they say, oh, got it. But the right brain learner needs to know what is going on out here, and how do I get back to the details to figure that out. So we let them do that. We give them the framework, we start back at the beginning, and we say, here's how we go. Paul realized that if he could help children get past those blocks that put them on edge so that they could not learn because they were so stuck in their right brain when we were teaching to the left brain, that he was able to help children move past those blocks and get into a learning situation where they were successful. How wonderful is that?
That is wonderful, Joni.
We need all kinds of learning to happen for our children in the system. So that's another piece that can happen. I work a lot with children. Sometimes it's an inability to focus, as we have an ADD and ADHD. Sometimes it's that hyperactivity. And often that's because there's something in our background that causes us to feel those feelings, to get upset, to notice upsetting kinds of things. And when we do that, they can calm down about the whole thing, and it's okay. And it doesn't need to be a problem. So we go there and we play with it. And the kids will often leave and say, I'm thinking about reading now and I don't even care. I used to hate reading. I don't want to go home and read. And parents will call me later on and say, I don't know what you did, but I said to my daughter the other day, junior high daughter who has hated reading her whole life, the girls are all going out to someplace, and she looked at me and said, you know what, Mom? I kind of got a new book and I'd like to open it.
Nice.
Mom said, I took one look at her and said, you go right ahead. She said, where in the world did that come from? But she said, I feel so differently about my ability to read and my desire to read all of a sudden since we've done the work and I have a new pattern, knowing I can be successful with it. How important is that?
That's tremendous.
There are one of the women that I find very interesting is her name is Carla Hannaford. She actually is a neurobiologist, and she has written a book, Smart Moves, Why Learning Isn't All in Your Head.
Okay.
And her book really, it's very scientific, so you have to kind of take it slow because it's really based in her research as a neurobiologist, but it speaks to different parts of the brain that register when we move different parts of the body. Very fascinating that way, as well as what are the eyes doing in regard to the brain and how do our ears work and all of those pieces. It's just so wonderful that we now have science to back up what we've thought about for a long, long time.
Sure.
And not been able to prove. We now have all the testing and the scientific machines and all those kind of things that really help us do that. The other piece that I find very, very interesting, and it's relatively new science, I've just started reading some of his books and watching some of his teleseminars, but Bruce Lipton is a medical doctor, an MD, who is also a researcher. And he has been doing research on DNA. Because you see, we've always felt that our DNA download controls who we are. Oh yeah, I've got heart disease in my family, so I'm sure I'm going to have heart disease. Or diabetes runs in my family, I'm sure I'll end up with that. Oh, we have anger management in our family, it's going to be a problem. All of those pieces come up for us. And in Bruce Lipton's research work, he found that the DNA really does not need to run us. We have the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Conscious mind is in our brain. Unconscious mind is actually in every cell of our body. And it has a deeper, further back memory than our conscious mind, because until we're about the age of 3, somewhere in that ballpark, we don't have enough nerve networks crossing the corpus callosum, which is between the right and left side of the brain. See, science. We don't have enough to give us the memory that we need to go back prior to somewhere around the age of 3. But our unconscious mind, which is stored in our body, has it all. And that's why when we use applied kinesiology to ask the system, we're really asking the subconscious mind, what does it know about this? And it will tell us, even prior to conception, what's going on with mom and dad often gets downloaded to us, and it's in our DNA, but we don't have to keep it. So when we use applied kinesiology to go back and say, did I get that from mom? Did I get that from dad? And often it can be a double download. You know, people will say, I have this poverty consciousness. Money is an issue. I can't do anything about it. And we can go in and release from that DNA. Now, that is not so much brain gym, but often people want something that's brain gym movement to help release from the DNA download that we're storing. So I will use brain gym to get the new pattern and the release going in the brain, and that's marvelous.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Joni, we're going to look at a video of you doing your practice. Can you give me like 3 high points to segue into what we're going to see?
I think what I'll do is put the video on and we'll kind of segue in as we do the video. So
okay.
We'll do that. We'll cut away to the video now.
Okay. Thank you.
So here I am in my office with one of my friends who's helping me demonstrate, and I'm demonstrating muscle testing here. I use it quite frequently because I like to know what the subconscious is telling us. I'm also writing things down because I want to make sure that I have all the notes that we're talking about, so it'll help lead us to other topics. I'm demonstrating a movement right now from Brain Gym, and it simply is very simple, where we're just touching our toes, very gently while we're saying some words. It helps release all of the tension up and down the back of the body. After we do a movement like that, I go back again and muscle test with people or have them notice how their body feels, because our whole intention is to release the emotion. So I'm muscle testing again with someone and writing down the notes so that we can always come back to whatever people have talked about. The next piece that her body has said it needs or wants is an uncurling of the ears, and it's a brain gym movement. It actually stimulates so many nerve endings in the ears, and it really can help us to see things, hear things, and speak about things very differently. So it's extremely effective in kind of shaking up the system there a little bit. And her system was saying that that's the piece she wanted to help get past a certain issue that she had brought up. So I'll go back and muscle test again, make sure that we released it. And sometimes the issue that we're working on actually needs to go back to the DNA and release. And once we release from either mom or dad's DNA, then we can go back in the lifetime of the person and find out what kinds of experiences actually help this person solidify that DNA download. And we want to release each of those things along the way. I'll go back and ask them, where are you feeling this in your body? And she was telling me it was in her head. And we went back to find out then, how do we get back to releasing the next step? And her system said she wanted a technique that worked with the energy meridians in the front of the body that controls our inward self, and out the back of the body that controls the external self, or how we react to to other people and to the environment. So we are tracing those energy meridians to help ourselves get past that. So as we continue to work on different issues, we want to always make sure that we have enough water, because we need to be hydrated in order for the information to move through our system the way that it needs to. I'm always looking in the book if I need extra ideas, or if her system is saying, there's a movement I want in there. And I pick up the books as I need to and recheck them, figure out what it is that we're needing to work with.
You can find me at www.mindbodyspiritint.com. That's my website. Or you can call 651-592-6181. 592-6181.